Boker Tov, Shabbat Shalom. Our clergy team here is meeting in our favorite space, the Gann Chapel, on Thursday, February the 22nd, and so eager to have this conversation with my colleagues and with all of you. This is about Israel, and specifically our recent Israel Mitzvah mission. 50 people from Temple Emanuel were in Israel on a JNF Mitzvah mission. We spent the entirety of the JNF part of this mission in the South. We were at the Nova Music Festival, and you see, has just become a spontaneous sacred site. It's kind of like an Auschwitz site. It's a memorial site, and you see pictures of the people who were murdered on October 7th at the Nova Music Festival. They are so young. They are so beautiful, and they are so dead. So young, so beautiful, so dead, so murdered. And you see their family members. We were there on a random Thursday afternoon. We were at the border of Gaza, weeding weeds in an onion field and in a tomato field, where both fields, tomatoes and onions, were overgrown with weeds because the usual people who pick them were not picking them. And so we were on our hands and knees. I have never weeded in my life. And everybody came out completely filthy with earth, but feeling completely fulfilled that they had done something helpful to this farm. And when we were at the orientation of the farm, the farmer said, I have to leave in real time. You can't script this kind of thing, because you could see the UN trucks of supposed humanitarian relief. And she said, just so you know, this is not humanitarian relief. This is food and resources that go straight to Hamas, and is actually not given, very little of it is given to hungry Gazans. Almost all of it is taken by Hamas. And so she left, and with her WhatsApp, a group of Israelis protested and stopped those trucks from going in, but that's where we could see it. We saw one of the kibbutzim that is down south, and then we went to a cemetery where 29 of the people who were murdered at Kibbutz Be'eri were laid to rest, and you could see mom, dad, and then two sons at 12 years old and 8 years old. And then the story was that the 12 and 8-year-olds were on top of their younger siblings, who were 6 and 4, who survived and are now orphaned. And you see a whole family, or the parents and 2 of the 4 kids, wiped out. And we were just in the midst of such intensity. One of the paradoxes was, to a person, I felt this myself, and everybody that I talked to said the same version of the same thing, that they felt so at peace and so anchored being in Gaza, being in the Gaza envelope, being on the border of Gaza, that they felt more at peace and more anchored being at the Gaza envelope than being in Newton. That they felt they were dwelling amongst their people, that they were dwelling amongst Israelis who felt very all alone. And so one of the questions that we had this whole trip was, this is so intense, but there's only 50 of us, so we have a whole congregation, can we bring this back home? So this conversation is intended to be kind of a test case. Can somebody who was at the Nova Festival down south, can they bring it home in a way that will land? And so I want to, and I don't know the answer to that, but there's nobody I'd rather do it with than with you guys. So I want to just kind of, so here's our plan for this conversation. I'm going to kind of share 4 different tensions about Israel that we saw. It was a living contradiction, and just have an actual, organic, intuitive conversation with you about Israel, okay? And what we're going to see in each of these 4 cases is 2 truths that are diametrically in conflict are each true. And where does that leave us, okay? And for each of them, I'm going to tell you a story that concretizes it, and then we'll just react in real time. Here's the first one. peace is not the answer, and war is not the answer, and there is no answer. So I want to unpack that and tell a story for each of those. Peace is not the answer. One of the common things that we heard in Israel was all of the Israelis in the south that we spoke with, including a woman whose son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren were all murdered at the Be'eri kibbutz. She survived, but she looks so as you would expect her to look, with her son, daughter-in-law, and 2 grandchildren murdered. Every person you talk to, you hear the following story, which was, we live here because we believe in peaceful coexistence. And we live here because we believe that Gazans and Israelis could make peace. And here's a story and one of the things they pointed out was that Hamas had perfect intel on October 7th. They knew everything. They knew where every socket was. They knew where every camera was. They knew where every security device was. They knew where every guard tower was. They knew where every aspect of the logistics and the security and the day-to-day running of the South was, and they were able to go there. How did they know? So here's the story. There was a very lovely Jewish family, Israeli Jewish family in the Kfar Aza that was doing a house renovation, and they hired as the general contractor a Gazan Palestinian. And they thought that this guy was their friend, and they had warm repartee, and they had warm friendship, and he wanted to hire other Gazan subcontractors to do the work. And he did the work, and they thought he was their friend, and they had meals with him, they had photographs with him. They thought that this is what we need to do to solve the problem. Like, he's a human. I like him. We're humans. He likes us. We're at peace. And then this is the template to solve the whole problem. And then it turns out he wasn't such a friend. He was, in fact, a Hamas operative. He reported to Hamas everything that they needed to know. He also, during the time that he worked renovating the home, he would secretly stash munitions, grenades, rifles, arms, bombs in their house. On the morning of October 7th, the very first people murdered were this Jewish homeowner. And then that home became the command center for Hamas. That's why Hamas had such intel, which is why there is zero appetite for a 2-state solution, zero appetite for a peace deal, etc. That's on the one hand, okay? So peace is definitely not the answer, and this week Bibi said no to a 2-state solution, and the Knesset voted overwhelmingly no to a 2-state solution. On the other hand, war is not the answer. Every Israeli knows fallen soldiers. And to give you an example, last Friday, I was davening at a minyan in Jerusalem, my brother-in-law Ari Shul. There were 12 men in the minyan. 2 out of the 12 were Israeli fathers saying Kaddish for their sons who had fallen in battle. And I was using a siddur that one of the fathers had done. He got a bunch of siddurim, like we do for yortzites. He got a bunch of siddurim that were made in honor of his son who had fallen. A particularly tragic story. This man was 42. He did not need to serve. After 40, you're exempted from miluim service. He had 5 children. He had a wife. He had 5 children. But he was inspired by idealism to serve. He fell in battle, leaving a wife who's now a widow, leaving 5 children who no longer have a father, and leaving a heartbroken father and mother, and the father says Kaddish for his son every day, and I was using the Siddur. And there's two fathers like that. So, peace is not the answer. No two-state solution, no trust, zero trust. The idea of a demilitarized Palestine is an obscenity. It's so obviously untrue. But perpetual war is not the answer. 576 Israeli soldiers have died to date. So, I wanted to start with your reaction to both of these sides of the equation. Peace is not the answer. War is not the answer. Peace is not a solution. War is not a solution. I wanted to just open this up for your comments and thoughts. And then I wanted to share with you a text that came to my, I was at Minyan this morning, and I saw a text that I had seen 1,000 times, and it popped in a new way for me this morning. But first, your thoughts and comments.
Can I ask you one question?
Yeah, of course.
You started by talking about how you found a feeling of connection and feeling more settled and more grounded and more at peace in the Gaza envelope than you do here. And
Yes.
so with that framing of war and war not being the answer, peace not being the answer, can you talk about that sense of, like, where did you get to on this trip with those truths?
Yeah.
How did you find that sense of
Yeah,
okayness?
Great. I'll tell you. Oh my God. I just love Israel. My heart and my soul belong to Israel. My heart and my soul belong to Israel. And everybody on this trip would say the same thing. And here's one moment that takes it in. So we're at the Nova Festival. The Nova Festival literally is shredding. It's gutting. It's like, oh my God, right? All this death. And then we went from there. JNF, Jewish National Fund, sponsored this. I cannot say enough good things about JNF. JNF is amazing. And they filled in this, after October 7th, JNF just emerged to create the space of connecting American Jews who love Israel to Israel in a really helpful, expert, professional way. I can't say enough good things about JNF. I am such a I was an JNF agnostic. I didn't know anything that they did, and now I'm a total convert to JNF. Anyway, one of the things that JNF's cause is kind of come to answer your question is JNF is very devoted to supporting the soldiers during the time of war, and also devoted to making the north habitable by Israelis and the south habitable by Israelis, and strengthening the northern and southern borders so that Israel is not all Israelis are living in the Imbal Hotel in Jerusalem. So one of the things they did was they created a space for Israeli soldiers to come when they're on leave for the day or whatever, and there's free food like barbecue, there's hot dogs, hamburgers, etc. There's fruit and coffee. There's a barber shop where somebody can get a haircut. There's a massage therapist. So you have all these Israeli soldiers who have been in the middle of hell, and they come to this rest stop, and they eat and they drink and they get a haircut and they get a massage. And then one of the really important principles of Israeli society is serving in the military. But what about young people who have special needs, especially kids who are neurodiverse and have other things? So many of the young Israelis who are neurodiverse and couldn't necessarily thrive in a battlefield have musical talent. And so they have a band. And this band of neurodiverse Israeli soldiers was played for us. And they're actually exquisite musicians and singers. And then it happened that one of the soldiers who was on duty, who happened to have been there, was a guy named Shlomo, who is a singer. And he after the band plays, he takes the microphone, and he's like really a charismatic rock star type. By the way, of course, everybody Googled him afterwards, and he became a viral sensation because there was a wedding of an Israeli soldier and his bride, and the Israeli soldier was in his military uniform, and all the guests were there. and there was nobody to sing Yemesh Kachech Yerushalayim. So this guy Shlomo, who's wearing his military clothing, who has a M16 rifle slinged over his shoulder, starts singing Yemesh Kachech Yerushalayim. You can just Google this. It got over 1 million hits, and so powerful. Anyway, Shlomo takes the microphone. He's just there as a soldier serving, and he says, I want to sing a song. You know, when other nations have tragedies, the world sings, "We are the world." Like when Haiti has its tragedy, when a nation has a tsunami or a flash flood, all these rock stars sing, "We are the world." After October 7th, nobody's saying, "We are the world" to Israel. So we're going to sing it to each other. Thank you for being here, Jewish people, to be with us and to hear us. And he started singing, "We are the world." And there was no dry eye in the house. And that's why people felt so anchored, because Israel's so alone. And we were told so often, thank you for just being with us. In our pre-trip in Jerusalem that weekend, most people did a walking tour on Saturday morning. And the guide said this is the first, he makes his living doing walking tours. This is the first walking tour he's had since October 7th. Thank you for being there. So we felt the feeling of we're just in the right place. We're in the right place. That's where we felt at peace. That's where we felt at peace. Anyway, but we're contending with a place where there's no particular solution. So what do you think
Wes,
about?
can I ask you a question? So going back to what you said earlier, it looks like there is nothing in between two-state solution, peace, and war.
Right.
What is the feeling that you got, talking to Israelis, and
so
where do they stand with that?
Micha did we met in Micha's new space. It's called Mabua, 3 Achat Ha'am in Jerusalem, and with 4 of his alumni. And Micha says that I raised with him Donniel Hartman's observation that we actually cannot win this war militarily. We can't defeat Hamas and we can't defeat Hezbollah. And Micha said we have to pause and talk about the difference between Western time and non-Western time. The Western time is we're all living on our screens and we want a solution now. So he tells this story that after he got out of the army, he went to Peru and he did Machu Picchu. And then he got a cab ride from Machu Picchu back to hotel. And while the cab driver is driving him, he just stops and he says, "I will be back soon to take you the rest of the way." So Micha, he doesn't get this, but he thinks soon is like 3 minutes, or 3 minutes becomes 5 minutes, and 5 minutes becomes 10 minutes, and 10 minutes becomes a half an hour. And Micha doesn't know where his cab driver is, and he's in the middle of Peru, and he has to get it. So he starts walking around, and he sees that there's a soccer game, and his cab driver is playing soccer. And Micha goes up to him and says, "You have to take me. I got to get back." And the cab driver says, "I'll be with you soon." So he says, soon, Western standard, is very different from soon, not Western. So he says, if you're expecting a decisive victory soon, Western standard, that's not going to happen. But he said, here is what Israelis need. In a word, and he quotes Churchill in the fog of World War II. Churchill said, the essential thing that Britain and the West must have is victory. Nothing less than victory will do. And Micha said, if a ceasefire is imposed on Israel, then Sinwar is going to emerge from his cave. He's going to emerge from his tunnels, and he's going to go like this. And the Arab world and the Muslim world and the Israel haters are going to cheer, and they're going to cheer, and they're going to cheer. And Israel's going to hear that cheering, that the Palestinians won this war. Sinwar is alive. He's going like this. And he doesn't care that 30,000 Palestinians died. And what that's going to do is create the sense that Israel has lost this war, and the Hamas is still there, and they're going to do another October 7th. And then Micha said there was going to be a death spiral in Israel. And the people who have means, the elites, are going to start leaving Israel. And that is how Israel will slowly bleed out. So he said, what is essential, what's at stake is Israel's existence. What's at stake is, will Israel survive? And the only way it will survive is victory, and that is coming soon, but not by Western time standards. So that's right.
Can I ask you a question
Yeah.
about that? Because I like you and so many people, we've been privileged not being in a war. But how do you sustain your morale for years? We are talking about years now. How the
Right.
soldiers sustain the morale, how the regular citizens sustain the morale, saying, because at some point in any other situation, we in life says, I cannot stand this anymore.
Right. So that is one of the another one of these paradoxes about soldiers. So let me tell you a story about soldiers. Okay, last Thursday night, the J&F piece of the trip ended at the Kotel. And we go to the Kotel, and I have never seen the Kotel so busy. I have never seen so much energy around the Kotel. And it turns out it was the Hashba'ah ceremony, the swearing-in ceremony for the Givati Brigade. So the Givati Brigade is combat troops. The Givati Brigade are the ones who actually go into Gaza. These are 18, 19, 20-year-olds who go into Gaza and do the fighting. These are the 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds who, if there's a booby-trapped house or a booby-trapped building, will die in the building, as 576 have to date. And what was powerful and mysterious about it is the level of positive energy. You see these soldiers. First of all, what's so powerful, and I wish we could just show these to all of our 18 and 19-year-olds in America who buy into the canard, who buy into the lie that Israel is about white colonialists settling a land of the people of color. That Israel is colonizers and we've taken the lands of indigenous people of color. Most of the Israeli army that was being sworn in that night were of color. People who are as black can be. People who are as brown can be. People who are as of color can be. It was, I didn't take a scientific sample, but I saw the soldiers, less than half were white. Less than half were white. Most were of color. Many were actually black and brown, and Sephardi and Edar HaMizrach. Anyway, but in addition to that, so that the white and black tortured racial narrative of America does not track for Israel. It just does not track for Israel. But in addition to that, you just see the energy and intensity, and it's called a hashba'ah, swearing ceremony. So what happens is the person who's leading it makes a statement, and they all repeat the words. And what they talk about is they will serve Israel loyally and with all of their being, including they will give their life for Israel. They will give their life for the Jewish people. They will sacrifice their life so that Israel can continue to exist. And they say this with full-on 110% intensity. Take Ne'ilah and multiply it by 1,000. Take Ne'ilah and multiply it by 1,000, and that is what these soldiers are saying, and their energy and their vibe, and that's what their parents are saying and their vibe. And it's just joyful and it's robust. And here's what's so mysterious about it and so powerful. They're doing it at a time of war. They're not going from there to like worse theoreticals, and they'll just be really buffed and really jacked and really fit, and then they'll become, startup nations 3 years later. No, they're going to a battlefield. And here's the next thing that's so powerful and so mysterious. Many of the 576 soldiers who died were from Givati Brigade. So these people who are saying, these soldiers, black, brown, white, of color, who are saying, I will sacrifice my life for the state of Israel, I will sacrifice my life for the Jewish people, and they're doing it with full-on intensity. They're doing it knowing they're replacing soldiers who've already died, and they're 18. And one of the soldiers is a young man named Yonatan, who is the 8th child of my sister-in-law's sister, Hadassah, and her husband Jair. have 8 children. Their 8th child is Yonatan. Yonatan is 18, and he is among them. And this is how dire the situation is. Usually after a hashpa'ah ceremony, the soldiers get a Shabbos with their families to enjoy. Like they've just sworn in, they've gotten their uniform, they've gotten their colors, etc. They've gotten their bars, right? Full of enthusiasm, and they get a Shabbos off. This was Thursday night. They got to go, but no Shabbos off. They're going straight to an army base for training so they can go straight into Gaza. So you ask, how do they do it? So somehow that is part of the miracle of Israel, just this kind of idealism. And of course, any American parent is got a lot of feelings and conflicting emotions thinking about our own kids at Columbia or wherever they are who are not doing that. And what is asked of Israeli 18 and 19-year-olds is just they keep the state alive.
What was it like for you watching that ceremony? Like, did you understand what was going on? Like, did everybody understand? What was the sort of feeling among the Temple Emanuel community watching?
Awe. It was both. It's like everything in Israel. It was awe, like, oh my God, the idealism, and oh my God, the strength, and oh my God, the conviction. Here's another thing that you hear. I mean, what you hear is you can't trust these Palestinians who betrayed us. And the other thing that you hear is they don't get us because they think that by committing atrocities we're going to give up. No, by committing atrocities we are more determined than ever, right? And Israelis came from, Israelis who were living in Greece or Newton or wherever they're living, or Europe, came in, they got more than 100% of the people that they wanted to come back. And so you get a sense that even though these young 18 and 19-year-olds are going to be taking the place of other 18 and 19-year-olds who have already fallen in battle, they are so determined to fight for Am Yisrael and for Medinat Yisrael. So there's something tremendously inspiring about that, and also guilt-inducing about that, and also sad about that. Inspired, guilt-induced, and profoundly sad. So I'll tell you what, this was, we were unpacking it, and 50 out of 50 people said they were so glad they came, and 50 out of 50 people said that it was just one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. And we were always processing and unpacking. At the very end, everybody said some version of that, but one of the comments was shared by our member Michael Gardner, who said that when he is in Israel and he has a week like this, and he thinks about what he's going back to in Newton, the difference is living in black and white and living in color. Mm-hmm. Like watching something that's in black and white, like a 50s style TV show, black and white, versus living in vivid technicolor. And that when you're in Israel, everything is just vivid technicolor. And people just felt like there was an intensity, technicolor intensity of existence in Israel. And that, and almost to a person, when I was flying back, everybody felt both tremendous relief that we're leaving this pot boiler, like oh my God, so intense, like the technical intensity is amazing, and oh my God, who can survive this? And also guilt, like we get to go home to our quiet, serene lives, and we're leaving Am Yisrael and Medinat Yisrael with all of this terrible tension. So guilt, relief and guilt at the same time.
Was any of you in the group met with anybody that related to the hostages?
Yeah, hostages were a whole other set of complexities. So first of all, the minute you land in Israel at Ben Gurion, you see that it's not the same because the airport is so quiet. The only airline that is flying is El Al. All the other airlines, Delta and American and Lufthansa and all the other airlines, they're not flying, only El Al. So the airport is really, really quiet. The other thing to your question, Elias, that is so pronounced is when you get out of the plane and you're walking to passport control, there are just pictures of hostages everywhere. Hostages are everywhere. and pictures of hostages are everywhere. The posters and signs are up everywhere. And we went to Hostage Square, Kikar Hatufim, and this was another searing moment. It's a whole huge complex devoted to the hostages. There is an artistic tunnel rendering, and some of our members didn't want to walk through that, even the artistic tunnel. It was just too triggering. Shira and I walked through the artistic tunnel, and then it exits into a tent where there was a woman, a Jewish woman, a mother of a 21-year-old son named Bar, who is still a hostage. And it felt very much like a Shiva visit, but so far as we know, he's still alive. But she was receiving a Shiva visit from the Jewish people that has been, 130 plus days long. So the hostage thing is so complicated because two things are both true. One, for Israel to be Israel, for Israel to continue to have its soul, it must redeem the hostages. And how could Israel be Israel if its hostages are not redeemed? And that's why, actually, when we were there, two of the hostages, who actually know Pedro and Elena Morgan from our shul, were redeemed. These are Latino Israeli hostages, and they were redeemed. That was, the most inspiring news since October 7th, basically. On the other hand, there is a profound sense that what Israel really must do is win this war. Victory is what it's about. We can't have Sinwar coming out and going like this and having the Muslim world say and the Arab world say that Israel lost this war. We can't have that. And so Israel cannot fight with one hand behind its back. And also it can't release terrorists and murderers who are going to create future hostages. So it's just such a mess. We must get the hostages back, and actually we can't if we want to win this war. And both of those are true.
What was the political landscape like? I know that that's been something that we've been hearing a lot about here, about there's, the sense of fracturing at the edges. There's this uniform resolve, and then there's also the sense that there is concern that the political world might just break apart. What was your experience vis-a-vis political reality there?
Yeah, so that's another, A and the opposite of A are both true. On the one hand, you see this sign everywhere, B'yachad nenatzeach, together we will prevail. Yachad nenatzeach, together we'll prevail. You see that sign everywhere. You also see the sign everywhere, F, where it is spelled out BB, FBB, 2 exclamation marks. So we're walking to Hartman on Shabbos afternoon. There's a huge picture, and a lot of our members took pictures of it, F written out, BB, double exclamation mark. We happened to have been walking by his home in Jerusalem, huge signs everywhere, FBB. So not so unified. And then everywhere you turn, there were these signs that say, picture of Bibi, Ata Harosh, Ata Asham. You're the head, you're guilty. You're the head, you're guilty. So a lot of energy that is that. Then the other really problematic thing that actually happened while we were there is the ultra-religious, the Haredi, have a military exemption. And because of the ongoing war in the south and because of the expected war in the north, military service is going to become heavier, and miluim requirements are going to be longer, etc. And so the non-Haredi Israelis, including the secular Israeli and just the Dati Le'umi, who are serving so like lions, as they say, and dying in big numbers, they're serving more and more and more, and their Haredi brothers are not serving at all. So my sister-in-law, Tziparit, I asked her how she experiences this tension. So she says she experiences it every day. She's a pediatrician in Jerusalem, and she has a receptionist. And the receptionist is a Haredi woman. So Tziparit's son, Yeshayahu, is down south in Gaza near booby-trapped buildings and bombs and other such things. And her son-in-law, Elon, married to her daughter Hannah, is up north, sleeping outside in fields. Elon is still not home. Yeshayahu got back, but Elon is still sleeping up north. They can't sleep in military barracks because military barracks are military bases are a target for Hezbollah's missiles. So she has a son and a son-in-law in the south and in the north whose lives are literally on the line, who are in harm's way. And as she's been to shivas and funerals for all these other families, and is always wondering, is the next shiva and the next funeral mine? And her receptionist is just no part of that reality, right? Her kids are safe and sound and secure. And she said it just fills her with rage every day. And that problem is only getting worse, not getting better. So you have, again, the tension of, there's peace is not the solution, war is not the solution. We absolutely have to have the hostages back. We can't actually get the hostages back. And biyachad natseach, we must have unity. And in fact, that unity is already seriously fractured, both as regards Bibi and political leadership and as regards the ultra-religious. Yeah, so dear colleagues, I just wanted to end with a piece of Torah. One of the beautiful things about having a prayer life is that prayers that you've been saying or not thinking about that have kind of like been wallpaper, that it's been there but it hasn't registered in particular, it didn't land, all of a sudden pop. So I was at Minyan this Thursday morning, February 22nd. We took out the Torah, and on page 65, we said words that I have said personally 10,000 times in my life, and for the first time it registered. It's what you say when we open the Torah, when we open the ark to take out the Torah, okay? Vayehi bin soah Aaron, vayomer Moshe. Whenever the ark was carried forward, Moses would say, and then here's what Moses would say, Kuma Adonai, God arise, Adonai arise, v'yafutzu oivecha, make your enemies scatter, v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha, and make the people who hate us disperse. So we take out the Torah, and what do we pray for? We pray that God is going to help us with our enemies. It's a poetic parallelism. V'yafutzu oivecha, that our enemies should be scattered. V'yanusu misanecha mipanecha, that our foes should be put to flight. Why? Ki mitzion tetzei Torah u'devar Adonai Yerushalayim, because Torah comes from Zion and the word of Adonai from Jerusalem. And what struck me today, I've said those words all my life, is that our story is always about the coexistence of enemies and people who hate us, and God's Torah and the word of Torah in Jerusalem. And this is a 3,000-year-old story. And I was thinking about the Givati Brigade, and they're the latest chapter in this story, that we want Torah, we want Jerusalem. Torah is about peaceful values, but the reality is that our people, especially in Israel, has just always had enemies. That is a timeless story and a timeless tragedy and a timeless reality, which means that peace is not the solution, war is not the solution. It just means this tension continues from generation to generation. And that in turn fills us with the admixture of love of Israel and relief that we're not living there, and then guilt that we feel relieved. So it is I guess I would say that the best line that takes in Israel is still Danny Gordis's first book, If a Land Can Make You Cry. If a Land Can Make you cry.
Wes, this has been, I just want to say, so powerful to get to sit with you and hear your testimony and your experiences there. It's so different than what we can possibly access through news or through social media here. As you're coming back, you started by framing the question, can you bring this back? Can you bring it back to community? And I have the question for you. What would it look like for you if we as a community really responded to this moment?
Right.
Coming back from this trip, what would you like from the Temple Emanuel community?
Oh, thank you for that question, Lisa. I just love you, and I love that question. I love you guys. I have a very simple answer for what I would like. If I had a single ask for Temple Emanuel, and if I had a single ask for you and Elias and Dan, and if I had a single ask for our, 1,400 plus families, our 4,000 souls, it is to go to Israel now. Show up in Israel. Show up in Israel. Go to Israel now. Like whatever other summer plans you were going to do, you were going to go to Cancun, or you were going to go to some other cool place, or you were going to be on the beach no, go to Israel. This is a historic pivot point moment. All of us are younger than 75, so all of us have grown up where Israel's existence was a blessed part of our reality. You just get the sense of how tenuous that is. I get the sense of how tenuous it is. In all the hotels that we stayed at, you have these families, displaced internal refugees from the north and displaced internal refugees from the south. Imagine that you couldn't go home because your home is at risk of being bombed, or your home is at risk of having Hamas terrorists murder you and your family. And so imagine that you and Solomon and Eder are living in a hotel room for months on end. I was at one of the hotels. I see this grandfather who's holding this cutie pie little girl. She's just such a cutie pie, so sweetie pie, so cutie pie. And I say to the grandfather, how old is she? And he said she just marked her 3-month birthday. And I realized this is a little girl who has spent her entire existence in the Orient Hotel. The entire existence in the Orient Hotel. And she's with her grandfather and parents and other extended mishpacha in hotel rooms. So tenuous. And it takes the heroic courage of the Givati Brigade, who's going to replace other Brigade soldiers the Givati soldiers who have died. And they're literally trying to keep the state of Israel alive. My ask is go to Israel. There are mitzvah missions all the time. We're going in Hartman. Go to Israel. Show up for Israel. That is the single most important thing that any of us can do. Figure out how to get to Israel now. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.